Neighbor continues to smoke, which pollutes my apartment, so I retaliate with noise pollution. I live in apartment complex, neighbor below me continues to smoke, which then blows into my apartment, I can't stand the smell. I suggest you subscribe to my channel and all these problems will pass you by. They've been asked to stop and a complaint lodged with Strata. They live on the bottom floor, so their courtyard extends out a few meters past my balcony, and this is where they sit and smoke. So now I use a Bluetooth speaker angled down at their courtyard and I play children's highly repetitive songs The Wiggles whenever they're out there smoking. I have to shut all the windows since they're smoking, so I can't hear it, so it doesn't bother me, but they don't seem to enjoy it all that much. Edit. To clarify, smoking in all areas of this apartment complex is prohibited under the bylaws. Edit. I live in Australia, not the US. Yes, apartment complexes in Australia can have bylaws like this. Edit. US can also have bylaws against smoking. Which is awkward to the person who said this is why I choose to live in the US when informed about Australia bylaws. Might I recommend Baby Shark for your next musical choice? Literally the most annoying song of all time. Comparatively, I find the song that never ends to be much more annoying as it burrows into my brain and I find myself singing it for weeks. Why? Now I'll be singing that all day. I'd say sorry, but it would be a lie. I wanted everyone else to be suffering with me. Misery loves company. Because this is the song that never ends. On YouTube you can find a track about a half-hour long called Most Unwanted Music. It's truly unpleasant. Do with that info what you will. I listened to it yesterday while drunk at a party. It was beautiful. On it. Going there now. My dad had a CD of polka music called Music to Break Your Lease by. I think that Snoopy has got that one. I do something similar at the bar I frequent. If people start getting shitty I just throw Elmo singing the Macarena on the jukebox. 80% of the time it works every time. I used to work in retail. People don't like to leave even when it's past closing time. 20 minutes before close, I would turn off the music to make the first announcement. After 5 minutes of silence I give another announcement, then wait 5 more minutes, making sure the lingering customers were real comfortable with not hearing anything. Bookstore, then with 10 minutes left to go I would put on Justin Bieber's Baby, the chords would start, dun dun. Dun dun, and people would frantically look up, as if to ask, is that what I think it is? By the time Bieber's pubescent voice started in with woo, people would stand up, grab their things, and start heading towards the door. If they made it through Baby next was Boyfriend. The rap breakdown by Ludacris usually did the trick. I think only once did I have to make it to As Long As You Love Me. I gifted the mix CD to the next person when I finally left. I live in senior housing and it's no smoking in the building or within so many feet of the building. We have a smoking gazebo out back for the smokers, which is okay until the dead of winter. We live in Kansas. Makes me glad I don't smoke. I'm a smoker, but I think it's good that their apartment block specifically for non-smokers. Smokers just shouldn't move in there. Simple. Now if only they could make children-free apartment blocks. Most people in most places just take whatever apartment is available that they can afford. The cost of housing doesn't leave wiggle room for accommodating preferences. The US used to have adults-only apartment complexes or adults-only sections. People who had babies usually had to move by the time their children were 6-12 months old. Mean high school teacher payback. So back when I was in high school I had one teacher was particularly mean. She was an older lady and she had it out for me for some reason. She was my first class of the day and it was always tainted my day. She was clearly going through menopause because her classroom was always like a freezer. I would be literally shaking. So I started wearing my jacket to class to stay warm. She decided to implement a rule, targeting at me, that no jackets could be worn in class because it was a fire hazard. It literally made no sense. So one day I'm wearing my jacket in her class and she asks me to remove it. I comply, but I'm wearing a tank top underneath. This is against the dress code. When girls would break the dress code as punishment, the principal would make them wear their jackets. This is in the days before Gen X and students fighting sexist dress codes. She sent me straight to the principal who asked me to wear my jacket. The frustration in her face by outsmarting her was priceless. I'm still proud. That was a great way to outsmart her. I have never understood people being mean for no reason. It's a case of respect ma authoritath. I even read it with a tone. I just read it with a tone, out loud. My kid is looking at me like I'm batch T crazy. I had a teacher who tried to give me detention for wearing a coat. It was February in Pennsylvania. This was during a time when my brother was very sick in the hospital, which she knew. She was an absolute witch and I look forward to the day I can dance on her grave. Good on you for telling her off. I had a teacher who got off on putting us in humiliating situations. The worst part was she kept singling out a classmate who'd lost his mom. He'd had to move into a tiny mobile home with his grandma and wasn't dealing well with the loss or his sudden poverty. He was particularly sensitive to the whole trailer trash thing. Apparently the teacher took note of that. One day she started shrieking at him over some small infraction. She screamed at him about how he was trash and would never be anything but trash. She picked him up and stood him in the trash can. This was one of those old metal ones that was tall enough he couldn't climb out without turning it over. She then ordered the rest of the class to make paper wads and pelt him while she led a sing-song chant straight about how he was trash. We must have been 10 or 11 years old, but even then I knew just how messed up that situation was. Every last one of us was terrified of her. Unfortunately, good teachers burn out, and her kind seemed to last until retirement. She was still teaching when I graduated high school. Jesus. What a cunt. I hope she's suffering some karma. This sounds like a story by Roald Dahl. How freaking awful. I don't get the reference, but I witnessed the one above with my own eyes. I also had a first grade teacher who had a habit of shaking kids violently. I remember her shaking me so hard my head hurt a lot afterward. She must have realized she went too far. She told me that if I told my parents what she'd done they would punish me for making her so mad. I swear some people go into education just for a steady supply of victims. My, at the time, 12-year-old had a similar interaction with his teacher. It happened to be a week or so before parent-teacher interviews, so I went and discussed the situation. I listened carefully to the teacher give her position. When she was done I asked her if she was familiar with the school dress code, followed by me pulling a copy out of my pocket and reading it to her. It included things like no hats in the halls, which my son also got in trouble for, and no spaghetti straps for girls, don't get me started on that one, but no mention of jackets, coats in class. I said. There are enough rules already, why are you making up more? I added that if she felt it was important enough she was welcome to have the school amend the dress code, which I would then fight, otherwise leave my son alone as he was simply cold and not bothering anyone. Near the end of the meeting she tried to bring the topic back up asking, you understand where I was coming from, right? I looked her straight in the eye and said nope, not at all. End of conversation. You can discipline my kid if it is deserved, but you are not going to get away with making up stuff just because you want to. Oh, I'm the same way with my 12-year-old son. You do something stupid you're gonna take that lick, then you're gonna get in trouble at home too. You get in trouble for something you can't control or doing the same thing as everyone else, talking the last min of class. Then yeah, I can go to the carpet on your behalf. I had a math teacher who hated me for some reason. I really struggle with math too, and I feel like she went out of her way to make it more difficult for me than it had to be. It was only pre-algebra, but math that includes the alphabet just does not come easy to me, and I was able to just barely keep up until I had to take a sick day a few weeks into school. The day that I was absent was a day she moved onto some entirely new concept, and I was completely lost the next day, and she outright refused to help me catch up. I wish I had a petty revenge story to share about getting even with her, but she was such a bully that I just ended up either fucking off during or skipping her class. My mom tried to get me help with math. I really should have had an Irish punts for math, but the high school refused to accommodate me and labeled me as a delinquent instead of a student in need of support. When I learned that my school wasn't interested in helping me succeed as a student, I just kind of stopped giving a shit. Having a shitty teacher who dislikes you can really not just ruin your mood every day, but they can also really set you back by literally damaging your education. If you're reading this, Ms. Niddick, fuck you. Edit. Typo. My now 21F Dow has rheumatoid disease. Her doctor gave her a prescription for her high school, she was 16 at the time, for her to carry water with her at all times. One substitute teacher wouldn't honor it. He had dumped her water out twice before. He was a retired but working part-time teacher. She used a Walmart-purchased clear bottle and refilled it during the day. The third time he snatched way to go parent. I wish all parents would stand up to teachers who abuse and bully kids. Ed her bottle, dumped it down the drain in front of her, then stomped on it. She cursed him and walked out of class. She went straight to the office, reported what happened, then called me. The principal hid when I came in. The asked principal tried to deal with me. He was aware this guy had tossed her previous bottles. I demanded to speak to that teacher. The principal refused. I proceeded to loudly inform him that this shit was not gonna be tolerated anymore. That if they didn't take care of it that day then I would after school hours. He asked if that was a threat. My kid just laughed. I smiled when I said we go to church with that asshole, and I'll make it public there in front of the whole congregation, and I'll drop your name, plus let everyone know that pussy is hiding in his office. Gonna take care of it now. He got sent home and is no longer allowed to substitute. I'm so glad all our kids are out of school now. Was in grade 6 in Spanish class and I had started my period. It was right at the start of class and I asked to use the restroom. I felt like I was going to puke from the pain and my female teacher said no. Before I could turn around and go anyway, I puked all over her at her desk. I ended up at the ER later and it turns out I had a ovarian cyst rupture. Teacher here. I'm sure a few kids think I hate them for no reason. But, a few days ago one of them shouted who's Jeffrey Dahmer while everyone was taking a test. Talked to kid and he said he was curious and wanted to know. He says I pick on him because I always kick him out of the class and no one else gets kicked out. Told him who else is yelling random stuff during tests. Hey, just wanted to tell you that as a teacher, we hate that old bitch too. She's a bitter old hag that should have quit long ago and makes the job more difficult for everyone around her, but is just writing it out to max out her pension. Oh, this video has come to an end. If you want more such cool stories, then go to one of the many following videos.